Good. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. The third episode, or the third session of this 7-episode series, pointing out the obvious, I'm going to talk about jurisprudence, which is fiqh, basically. This 3-letter word in Arabic, and it's a mouthful in English. And I'm going to talk about aspects of fiqh that I think, that I know are obvious, because if you spend more than anything beyond a year of studying it, then you will conclude these things immediately. It'll actually be a part of your teaching process, and the majority of Muslims don't seem to understand it, which leads to so much controversy, and even like masajid break off into different, people break off into different masajid, people stop trusting each other, people stop, they don't allow marriage to occur just based on just lack of understanding of something very simple and very easy. So I'm going to go through today will probably be the longest session in terms of, or in the most condensed in terms of content. The sessions after this, over the next couple of days, will be shorter, inshallah, and a little bit lighter. But today is a little bit heavier in terms of the content. So, as every session, I start with a statement. Oh, perfect. So obviously, we need a source of knowledge to learn our deen, to learn our faith. That source of knowledge must be an authentic one, and it must follow the laws of logic and sensibility in order for us to trust it. It has to follow the law of Islamic interpretation. Islam was designed by design, and this is the word you're going to memorize from me today. You're going to learn this, you're going to take this home with you. Islam was designed, meaning it was by design, to have multiple opinions and differing schools of thought within it. This is by design. This is not a mistake. This is not lack of work from a certain generation. This was by design. So we must choose a trusted source of knowledge to learn our rituals and accept the breadth of opinions that our faith is designed to contain. So your job is to choose a school of jurisprudence or thought. You'll learn your rituals, you'll learn how to practice, understanding that there's a breadth of opinions that exist out there that have validity to them, and that this is not by mistake, this is by design. And this is important. This is so important in our deen to understand. And again, it's pointing out the obvious. If you were to study fiqh for anything more than a year, then you will conclude this on your own, just by studying one madhab. Because within one madhab, you're going to hear 3 or 4 opinions that the scholars have offered, and the madhab allows for all of it. And this is no longer an issue of, wallahi, we dropped the ball at some point as Muslims, or one generation made a mistake and we ended up with lack of clarity, or we don't know what's right and what's wrong. No, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed it. So I'm going to start by just telling you, and a lot of these slides are taken from a lecture that I give within the introduction course called The Divine Design. And it's a long lecture. It usually takes 3 sessions to finish or more. So I've taken some of the slides from that lecture to help you kind of get a sense of what I want to explain to you today. When you take the story of the cow in the Quran, the longest surah in the Quran is called Al-Baqarah, and it's quoting a specific story that happened within it. And the surah is very long, so you could honestly, it could be called many different names, because there's a lot of words that are coined only in Surah Al-Baqarah. Surahs are usually named after the word that was coined within the surah, meaning the word that is used there and only used there, or the topic is of importance. And amongst all the stories in Surah Al-Baqarah and all the teachings, this story has a specific degree of importance, and hence the surah was named after it. And what does the story really tell us? It tells us that Musa alayhi salam came and gave Bani Israel a command. He told them, "Ithbahu baqarah." You are required to slaughter a cow. Once you slaughter the cow, come back and I'll tell you what the next steps are. So they spent 4 or 5 verses of our lives basically arguing with Musa alayhi salam, asking him questions. Well, there's a lot of cows, so ud'u lana rabbaka yubayyin lana ma hi. What is it? Okay, give me more details. So he gives them a few details. لا فارض ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك فافعلوا ما تؤمرون. Just go and slaughter it. ud'u lana rabbaka yubayyin lana ma lawnuha. No, we need to know the color. طيب صفراء فاقع لونها تسر الناظرين. Go do it. ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي إن البقرة تشابه علينا وإنا إن شاء الله لمهتدون. There's too many cows, we're too confused, tell us more. So لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها. It took them a year to find this cow. It took them a year to find the cow that the Prophet Musa alayhi salam explained. And this is, there are other narrations in the books of tafsir that it took them longer than that to find this cow. I found them a long time to find the cow. Now, the point of the story is that had they slaughtered any cow, it would have been fine. Any cow, a green cow, it would have been fine. As long as it's a cow and not a donkey or a horse. As long as it was a cow, they would have been fine. Now yes, there is the perfect cow, the cow that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants and is the best of them all. But any cow would have sufficed. Any cow. The more questions they asked, the more narrow their selections became. The more they asked questions, the less they could choose from. And it became narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower until it was only one cow in the land that had all of these descriptions and all these attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pointed out. The point of the story is that they didn't have to ask these questions. And had the moment he said, اذبحوا بقرة, they went and they found a cow, any cow, and they slaughtered it, it would have sufficed and the story would have been shorter and they would have been fine. Now the reason that this story is in the Quran is to explain that we have a similar situation in our deen, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purposefully gives the command open-ended. It's open-ended. There's a lot of different ways to understand it. By design, he could have began the command with all of the details. Like he could have said, here's the point. He could have said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً لا فارض ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك صفراء فاقع لونها تسر الناظرين لا دلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها. He could have started, that could have been the command in the surah. That could have been what Musa alayhi salam came and told his people. But no, he came and told them, اذبحوا بقرة, a cow. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. A cow, open-ended by design. Open-ended purposefully. Any cow works. Now, if you want to know the ultimate, the best option, the optimal option, there's one, but you don't have to do that. Now, if you do that, may Allah bless you. That's great, but you don't have to. You are good with any baqarah. This is the moral of the story. This is why the surah is named after. I wrote my thesis on this. This is why we have what we have in our deen. This is not by mistake, because some people, their understanding of Islam is fundamentally different than what Islam is actually about. And it's not a tertiary problem. It's a fundamental problem. If your understanding of your deen is that there's only one correct answer for every given question and command, then you have misunderstood how Islam functions. This is fundamentally different from how Islam is designed. If you believe that, then you're going to run into trouble. And this is where we get extremism from and fundamentalism from. This is one of the sources. Is the lack of ability to understand how Islam was designed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam is not a line. No. Islam is not a line. Islam is a river. It's a river. There's more than one lane for people to be swimming in. And they're still within the river. They're still within Islam. Now there's a point where you're thrown out of the river and you're on the banks. You're outside. You're on land. You're not in Islam anymore. There is a point. It's not an ocean where it doesn't matter what you do, you're still Muslim. No, it's a river. There are two banks on both sides. And if you make certain mistakes, will remove you from this river and you'll end up outside. You're no longer Muslim. But it's not a line. It's not. If you see it as a line, we have a problem. If there's only one answer for every single scenario, if there's only one right thing and everything else is wrong, then we're in trouble, because you have misunderstood what Islam actually is. It is designed to be a river, not to be a line. And the evidence to explain this is in abundance. This law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us is designed to evolve and to grow. It's very, very interesting. The way Islamic fiqh is one of the most beautiful laws that exist within the world. It's not well understood by the people who follow it. Unfortunately, we just don't fully comprehend it. It is by design made to grow and evolve as time progresses. As we are plucked out of our natural or initial habitats and move to different parts of the world, as time moves along and we end up with new technologies and changes in the way people function and the habits that people have, Islam's law is designed to continue to grow. Because Islam's law is not based on an action, it's based on principles, which is different. The laws of other prophets before, they were designed to help a specific group of people for a specific period of time. That law was going to be abrogated after a certain period. After a certain amount of time elapsed, that law was going to be abrogated. It was going to undergo nasakh by another prophet who was going to bring a different law. So they didn't need principles. They just need to know what to do. They just needed to know, here's what you do. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's how what you attend to. Forget about any other details. You don't need them. Because once the reality changes, once the environment changes, We will send another prophet with another set of laws to fix it for you. But since Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final prophet and messenger, and there's no one after him to come and abrogate the law has to be designed in a way where it can evolve and it can grow on its own. Which was why Islam is a law of principles that leads to conclusions and rituals and behaviors and habits and practices, not a law of practices. And this is a fundamental difference, again, in understanding how we see it. If there's only one answer, yet you have not comprehended إِذْبَحُ بَقَرَةً and how the deen works. And if you understand Islam to be the conclusions, meaning just the rituals that exist at the end, the practices, the rulings at the end, then you have misunderstood how Islam is designed, because it's a law of principles. These principles generate laws. These principles have to be applied appropriately to different scenarios when applicable. And when it's relevant and when it's proper and you apply them, you will end up with rulings that will serve the purpose that the principle was put there to serve in the beginning. And if that's too complicated, give me a few moments and we will arrive at something. So a very good example of this is this verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَسْأَلُوا عَنْ أَشْيَاءَ إِن تُبْدَ لَكُمْ تَسُؤْكُمْ وَإِن تَسْأَلُوا عَنْهَا حِينَ يُنَزَّلُ الْقُرْآنُ تُبْدَ لَكُمْ عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهَا وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ قَدْ سَأَلَهَا قَوْمٌ مِّن قَبْلِكُمْ ثُمَّ أَصْبَحُوا بِهَا كَافِرِينَ. So this is a very interesting, when I go through the tafsir of Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah Al-Ma'idah is 16 consecutive يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, 16 commands to the believers. And this command is titled, don't overcomplicate your law. Don't overcomplicate the law you were given. Don't ask questions to the Prophet ﷺ. That if you ask the question and he gives you the answer, تَسُؤْكُمْ, is going to make your life difficult. You will be upset with the answer that you get. So don't ask the question. And if you ask about it as the Quran is being revealed, he is obligated to answer ﷺ. And then it'll be revealed to you. عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهَا, but this detail of the law that you asked about, Allah had forgiven. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had left open-ended purposefully. عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهَا. He didn't want you to be stuck with one answer. He wanted it to be open-ended, but you now made it difficult by asking the question. Don't ask the question. Leave it. Scholars will come later, gather all of the evidence, take all of the mushaf, take all of his life alayhi salatu wasalam, and then figure it out, and then offer people rulings that will suit them and suit their culture and their background and their circumstances and what they're going through and where they're living and when they're living. So don't ask. So the Sahaba were told not to ask questions. Interesting, right? And this didn't happen at the beginning of Islam. No, it happened later. Once the Sahaba, the numbers were high, once the Prophet ﷺ was giving out ahkam, because in Mecca there was no ahkam. The questions were all faith-driven. They were all iman-driven. Iman-driven questions you ask. Ask as much as you want until you solidify your iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it came to fiqh, people had a million questions. This is the story of my life. There's always 5-6 people with 7-8 questions about their... It's tiring. Alhamdulillah, we try to do our best to answer people's questions, but I can't imagine how his life would have been alayhi salatu wasalam without this ayah. And everyone wants a piece of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam for hours because they need solutions for all of their problems and answers for all of their questions. So people were attending his halaqat, and the moment he gives a statement, 15 hands go up. They all want to ask questions. So the Quran came and said, don't ask him anymore. Because when you ask him, he has to answer. And if he answers, then you're restricted. You're limited with this answer. That's it. You can't leave that answer anymore. So don't ask. قَدْ سَأَلَهَا قَوْمٌ مِّن قَبْلِكُمْ. A group of people asked these questions before. He's referring to Bani Israel, who asked those questions about the Baqarah. And then continued with the same mentality with Musa alayhi salam throughout his life. And the same mentality with Dawood and Sulaiman and Zakaria and Yahya and Isa. They continue with the same mentality of asking questions they don't have to ask. They're told not to. قَدْ سَأَلَهَا قَوْمٌ مِّن قَبْلِكُمْ ثُمَّ أَصْبَحُوا بِهَا كَافِرِينَ. And then they left their whole law. They ditched the law completely and they stopped practicing altogether, because they restricted themselves. So this is an important. And I share these stories all the time with the congregation, because to me is one of the aspects of the compassion and the loving attitude of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that he was very, very conscious of this. He was very conscious of this. He would say, لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل صلاة. If it wasn't for the fact I was scared to make it difficult for my ummah, I would tell them to always use siwak before prayer. Where's the difficulty? The difficulty is if it becomes obligatory. That's the difficulty. If it's interpreted later on as being wajib. If it becomes a fard, meaning your salah is invalid without doing siwak, now we're in trouble. Now the stock market for miswak trees goes up, and now people have to, it becomes a mess because siwak is obligatory. But he doesn't want it to be obligatory, alayhi salatu wasalam. He wants it to be something that is optional, that is recommended, that is khair. But if you don't do it, you're fine. So you say, لولا أن أشق, if it wasn't for the fact I'm scared to make the life of my ummah difficult, I would have made the command, but I didn't. Tarawih is one of the prime examples. He wouldn't come out certain nights. He would not come out for the for salah. Even though people are praying and people want to come and pray, people are filling the masjid, he doesn't want to come out. Why? Because he's scared that if he comes out every night in a row, it goes from being a sunnah that we enjoy in Ramadan to becoming a fard. And imagine if you had fard 30 nights of salah. It's hard. Alhamdulillah, most people do it. Alhamdulillah, but you do it on your own terms, and you do it, and if you need to take a night off, you can take a night off, and you're not feeling guilty about it, and not. He told us the fara'id, alayhi salatu wasalam. He told us Fajr and Isha, you don't miss those. You don't miss those. Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib, clear. But the rest, he doesn't want it to become faridah. Well, the question becomes, well, why is he scared that it's going to become faridah? Here, the next piece of the puzzle is understanding why is it that the Prophet ﷺ was scared it was going to become faridah. Because he knew ﷺ that by design, Islam was going to evolve its law in a certain way. This is what he knew ﷺ. Meaning that the Islamic law, even from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, even him, he understood exactly how this law was going to evolve. He knew that pieces of evidence were going to become the way that scholars are going to conclude rulings, which is what I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about. So what are the four main sources of evidence that we use? Because the Prophet ﷺ could have said, okay, this is not this or this is not. Yeah, but if I don't, but if the narration doesn't arrive perfectly, then they're going to misinterpret what I'm saying, and then, so he knew ﷺ that his law was going to be based on interpretation. It was going to be based on people sitting and studying, and taking notes and looking and prioritizing, ranking evidence, and then concluding rulings to be fard versus wajib versus mustahab, mandub versus mubah versus. He knew that this was going to be the case, so he was very careful in what he said. He's very careful in what he did, alayhi salatu wasalam, in his life, because he's thinking long term. I need to make sure that I don't ruin the law for them. They don't restrict things that don't need to be restricted. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajma'in. Because he knew, because by design this is what it was going to be. I'm trying to make an argument for you here. That this is not something that, the way Islam is not because we weren't able to preserve the law. No, the way Islam is because this is how the law was designed to be to begin with. So you have Quran and Sunnah in consensus ijma' of scholars, and then qiyas or analogical deduction. These are the four agreed upon sources of evidence. All four schools of jurisprudence amongst all of the scholars within Islamic history agree that these four need to be used. Even those who we will use the argument, they don't accept qiyas, is untrue. They accept qiyas. The person who's saying that just doesn't understand what they're talking about. Like every single scholar historically within Islam accepts all four. There's not one scholar who does it, not even one. Even those who, if you Google right now, say Fulan, Imam al-Furayh doesn't accept the qiyas, it's batil. No, he does. The person who's saying this doesn't understand what they're describing here. All of them accept qiyas. They just accept it in different levels. They just accept it to different degrees and different ways, that's all. But the concept of qiyas as a source of evidence is absolutely accepted by all Islamic scholars. So these four sources of evidence is what we have. These are agreed upon. So Quran being number one, so Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, what he said, what he did, how he lived his life, his choices, what he didn't object to, what he objected to, what he smiled in the presence of, what he frowned in the presence of. All of these things are his Sunnah ﷺ, his habits, how he lived his life, his principles, his values, his stands, all of that. The third one, ijma', meaning when all of the scholars or all of the Sahaba or all of the knowledgeable people at a certain time say this, we all agree. No one disagrees on this. It's very rare, but when it's there, it's important. It's very, very rare. I can't even begin to explain to you how rare it is. Rare as in barely a handful of things fall under this. Barely a handful of things fall under this. Ijma' does not happen very, very often. At least, certain types of ijma' don't. And then qiyas. Qiyas is the gift of the human brain. The gift of our human brain of observing a pattern and then drawing analogies and then drawing a parallel, saying, well, if you did 1, 2, 3 in that situation, well, this situation is similar enough, so this should work here, and then we make the analogy, right? Requiring, obviously, a certain number of rules and guiding principles in order for that to be acceptable. And this is the study of usul al-fiqh and fiqh that you would spend your life, inshallah, learning. There's a list of disputed sources of evidence, meaning depending on the madhab, depending on the scholar, they will either accept this source of evidence or they won't. For example, istihsan, juristic preference. Masalih al-mursala, consideration of public interest. Al-urf, the custom, or custom in general, norms, what people's traditions are. Blocking the means, saddu al-dhara'i'. Qawl al-sahabi, the opinion of a companion of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Previous revelation, shara' min qablana, the revelation of Musa alayhi salam and Isa and other revelations. Presumptions of continuity, al-istishab. The actions of the people of Medina, amalu ahl al-Medina. All of these are disputed sources of evidence. Some scholars accept these sources of evidence and they use them, and some don't. Because the four that we have aren't enough for every single scenario. That's why. So be careful here. There's a reason why. It's because the four sources of evidence don't have every single scenario. So sometimes we're stuck with a scenario, we don't know, we go back to the Quran, it's unclear. It's not clear. We go back to the Sunnah, it's not clear either. We look for ijma', we don't find anything there. We look at qiyas, it's hard to draw one. So we have something in the Quran, something in the Sunnah that's kind of leaning in a direction, but it's not clear. So there's other sources of evidence. Well, so let's see, what did the Sahaba think? Like, what did the people of Medina do? Like, what is the continuity here? Like, what is the best interest of people? Like, what is the revelations that existed before us? Well, which one am I going to choose? Which one? Well, it depends. It depends on what you have, how you have ranked evidence. What sources of evidence are valid to you, and what sources of evidence you philosophically don't think have any weight, which is what scholars spent these last 1400 years discussing and debating and arguing about. So this is a really important diagram. I think almost every course, not every course, no. Maybe 80% of my courses, I find a way to shove this diagram into it, to make sure that you hear it or you see it at some point so that you memorize it, because it's really important. It's an important part of understanding Islam. That evidence has classifications. So there are three types of classifications. So regarding its sanctity, meaning the weight of the evidence, its sacredness, is it holy or not? Its authenticity, and what it indicates. These are the three categories to describe a piece of evidence. So you have evidence that is either sacred, meaning قال Allah or قال Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, something that is sacred. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it, that's holiness, that's sanctity. When the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam does it, that's sacred because he is Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. And then you have other pieces of evidence that are respected, meaning something a Sahabi did, something the Sahaba did, a lot of them did. Something that the early scholars of Islam, the Tabi'een and the Tabi'een did all the time. These are respected pieces of evidence. They're not sacred because these are not holy people, but they're respected, they're important. If Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is doing something all the time, what am I going to just dismiss that? I can't dismiss that. He is Sahib Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. He's the companion of the Prophet. He was known to be very knowledgeable. If he's doing it all the time, what do I do with this? See, you're thinking right now, I don't know what to do with this. Yeah, you're not supposed to. You're not going to know what to do with this. That's not your job yet. If you become a jurist or you become a scholar of origins of jurisprudence, then you can make that argument. Say, well, here's what I do with it, and here's where I put it, and here are the conditions, here's the caveats for me to accept this or to reject this. Very good. But right now, you're like, what? I'm just explaining that it's a piece of evidence. It's a piece of evidence. I want you to imagine Islam as a court of law. A jurist is a lawyer. Yeah? And Islam is a court of law. And the jurist has to make an argument. He has to use the evidence that he has available and make an argument for why we're going to rule A or we're going to rule B. We're going to say this is haram, or this is mubah, or this is wajib, or this is, there's one of the five rulings. Either it's obligatory, or it's recommended, or it's permissible, or it's unrecommended, or it's prohibited. These are five rulings that we have in Islam. One of them has to apply. Well, who is going to, arguments need to be made. The second category is authenticity. So you have evidence that is definitive, like the Quran. We don't argue, we don't say this ayah is sahih or da'if, right? There's no such thing. We don't read an ayah and say, well, maybe. No, all of the Quran, definitive. Certain aspects of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, definitive. Tawatur ma'nawi, meaning it came to us in a way that's mutawatir. Meaning there's no possibility that there's conspiracy, or there are lies, or that was made up. Certain aspects of his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, certain things he did, we know for sure. There's ijma', there's tawatur, ijma' upon it. And then you have other types of evidence that is probabilistic, wanni, meaning we have a high probability of believing that this happened. But there is a reasonable margin of doubt. Maybe 5%, maybe 10%, maybe 15%, maybe 20%, sometimes up to 40%. But it's probabilistic evidence, meaning there's a high probability, it's more than 50% that we believe that this happened. But we're not 100% sure. There's a possibility that it didn't happen that way. Can you say that about the Quran? Can you read a verse and say, well, this ayah, no, this is definitive. So you have pieces of evidence that are definitive, Even not just the Quran, you have other things. You have things that happened historically, things that the Sahaba did, that we know definitively that this happened. 100% this happened. There's no possibility that this did not happen because it came to us through 1,000 people. Many people told this, so there's no way that this is a lie. And then you have other pieces of evidence that is probabilistic. And this is where Sahih and Hasan and Da'if and Mu'dil and Yani Gharib and whatever, all these, looking into authentic chains of narration and talking about this, because we have to figure out how probabilistic is it? To what degree? Are we saying 55-60? Are we saying 75-80? Are we saying 90-95%? What are we talking about here? Right? Because this is all going to affect. Is there context missing? Are there certain details here that were left out? Are there other narrations that have different wordings that make this difficult to actually pin down to say that this is the one thing that he said? All these questions have to be asked. And the third category is indication. The piece of evidence that you have, is it clear? Or could it be interpreted in a different way? وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء. And a lady who gets divorced, she must take her iddah for 3 quru'. What is a quru'? What's a quru'? You open the Arabic dictionary. A quru' could be a hayd or it could be a tuhur. It could be the period of time when she's menstruating or the period of time when she's not menstruating. So which one is it? So this is not definitive indication, like قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. This is definitive indication. There's no scholar who sat down and said, well, let's see if we can interpret this differently. Well, Allahu Ahad, there's 3 letters in the word Allah, so maybe 3 and Ahad. No, it's قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. It's definitive. There's one way to understand this. There's no second way to understand this word. It's very definitive. The other verse is probabilistic, meaning there's different ways to understand it. Well, how are we going to choose which way? Scholars are going to make their arguments. They're going to bring their evidence and say, well, the Arab of Quraysh specifically, they use this or they use that, and they'll make an argument, and sometimes they'll agree and sometimes they won't. Just using this simple diagram. And in addition to this diagram, Ya Rabb, can anyone... Allahu Akbar. طيب, تمام. And understanding that there's a process for rulings, so the diagram, and there's a process for rulings. Meaning rulings don't just exist. Rulings have 2 things, one before them and one after them. So a ruling, a hukum, fard, wajib, sunnah, mubah, haram, this ruling requires something before it and things after it. For the purpose of this discussion, what I care about is what comes before it. What comes after it is something that either you figure out or you don't, doesn't make a difference. What comes after it is the consequence. Meaning, if you have this ruling and it's properly practiced, then the consequence of that ruling is going to be the benefits. We call that in Islam the hikmah. The hikmah. There's the benefit, the positive effects of this ruling. Now what precedes the ruling, what comes before the ruling, is something called the illah. The preceding reason or the objective. Al-hukm, the ruling, الحكم يدور مع العلة حيث دارت وجودا وعدما. Meaning any ruling will exist depending on its reason. If the reason is there, the ruling is there. If the reason disappears, the ruling disappears. Right? This is how we understand it. That's why I'm telling you Islam is a law of principle, not a law of rulings. The rulings exist if the preceding objective or the preceding reason exists there. If it doesn't, if somehow the reason or the illah is gone, then the ruling is gone. The hikmah can be gone. All the hikmahs can go, but the ruling will stay. It doesn't matter. The objective, the positive effects, the benefits, the hikmah, as many you can count. For example, lahm al-khanzir, right? It's haram to eat lahm al-khanzir. Why is it haram to eat lahm al-khanzir? Anyone say, why is it haram to eat lahm al-khanzir? Anyone? Why is it haram to eat lahm al-khanzir? Because Allah said so. That's all. Because what if it's good for your health now? What if I take a pig and I genetically modify and I make it good for your health now? Is it halal to eat? No, it's not halal to eat, see. So is there a illah? Is there a preceding reason for why it's haram to eat lahm al-khanzir? There is. Do we know it is the question. We don't know it. We don't know it. We just know that the reason is that it's khanzir. That's the reason. Now you can say, well, it eats its own feces. That's true. And we're not eating something that is impure. But I don't know that that's the preceding reason. So if it stops, if I bring a pig, one of those nice fluffy pink ones, and put it in my house, and I only feed it honey and milk and it never eats anything, is it okay to eat? No. Now, what you pointed out is the hikmah. It's not healthy. It has this. It has. You can figure out a million benefits of not eating it. But if you remove all of those benefits one by one, if you rip them all out by some genetic miracle, it's still haram to eat al-khanzir, because the preceding ruling is unknown to us. He never brought it up, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He just told us, don't eat khanzir, period. We're done. It's repeated in the Quran 7-8 times with no preceding ruling. Even if no preceding reason, even if we found out what the reason was, it's not going to change. And scholars have come up with the reason. The reason being that it's khanzir. As long as it's that type of animal, then that's the hurmah. Meaning there's an asl. By nature, the khanzir is the meat is not halal to us to eat. So as long as it's still a part of that family of boars, then we don't eat it. Other rulings will be different. Other rulings have a khamr, for example. Khamr has a preceding ruling. Preceding reason. Khamr as the ruling is haram. It has a preceding reason, has a illah. I'll just say illah from now on. You understand what illah is? Illah is a preceding reason, all right? It's the objective. What is the illah for khamr? Anyone want to say? What's the illah for khamr? Yeah, it's causing intoxication. Causing intoxication. So once something to drink doesn't cause intoxication, is it haram to drink? Something doesn't cause intoxication anymore. Is it haram to drink? No, it's not intoxicating, so you can drink it. If it's intoxicating, you stop it, because we know the illah. We know the reason. It's intoxication. It's very clear. So if something stops being intoxicating, you drink it. If it's intoxicating, you stop drinking it. Why? Because the illah is before the illah is going to come before the hukum, before the ruling. So this is how Islam works. Now, based on that, we can rank evidence. So class A evidence, sacred evidence with definitive authenticity and definitive indication. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, right? It's Quran, so it's sacred, it's fully authentic, and is definitive in its meaning. There's no way to, that's class A evidence. If you have class A evidence, إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ وَالدَّمَ وَلَحْمَ الْخِنْزِيرِ. Done. You can't, how are we going to interpret this differently? حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ وَالدَّمَ وَلَحْمَ الْخِنْزِيرِ. How? There's no interpretation here. Linguistically and logically, there's no way to misinterpret this verse. He has made, prohibited upon you, to eat something that died without proper dhabh, or to drink blood, or to eat pigs. Khalas. We don't need, we're good. For the rest of time, class A evidence, it doesn't matter. Class B evidence, sacred, authentic, definitive authenticity, full authenticity, probable indication. المطلقات يتربصن بأنفسهن ثلاثة قروء. Class C, sacred, probable authenticity, definitive indication. Sacred, probable authenticity, probable indication. Class E, understand? Can you say that any of these classes is not evidence? Can you say that any of these classes is not evidence? No, it's evidence. It may not weigh, class H evidence may not weigh as class B evidence does. They may not be the same weight. Class B is much heavier. But class H is still evidence. A respected piece of evidence that comes from for a sahabi, for example, or a alim or a tabi'een, right? With probable authenticity and probable indication is still evidence. It just doesn't weigh nearly as much as class B. But if you have a class B evidence, one piece of class B evidence, and you have contradicting it 100 class H and G pieces of evidence, understand? It starts to tater a bit. And then the scholars say, okay, this piece of evidence here is saying something to us, but then all of these scholars did something different throughout their lives. Well, why is that? It will cause some research. They'll start looking into this a little bit more. They'll start breaking it down, seeing, did we go wrong somewhere in understanding this class B evidence? Or did we go wrong in understanding the class D? I mean, they start looking. Why? Because they have to make a good argument. Most of the time, a class A evidence is never outweighed. It can never be outweighed by anything, because it's definitive and on every level and it's sacred. However, if you have a class A evidence but 50 class B evidences that contradict it, we don't have that in Islam, by the way. But if you did, then they would have to go back and see, well, maybe we missed something here. Maybe something needs to be looked at again. This is how Islam works. Islam is a very logical law, and it's based on understanding evidence, understanding how to weigh it, and then understanding how to interpret these pieces of evidence by design. By design, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that the Quran talked about certain things in certain ways and didn't talk about other things. And that the Prophet ﷺ's life, the majority of it would be probabilistic evidence with sometimes definitive indication and sometimes probabilistic indication. And that we would take all of these pieces of evidence and we would process them. It's a processor. It's a processor. You process all this evidence and you come up with a conclusion at the end, which is why scholars will differ. The reason that scholars will differ is because they have different ways of processing evidence. The Hanafi school, for example, of course, the first four is for everybody: the Quran, the Sunnah, consensus, and qiyas. But they also have opinion of a companion. The Hanafi school is very big on taking the opinions of companions, but they have conditions. They don't accept every companion. They're not okay with Abu Hurairah's opinion. They don't see him to be a faqih. They see him to be a muhaddith, a rawi, but not a faqih. They heavily depend on Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu and Sayyidina Ali, heavily, because they see them as fuqaha and the four khulafa. So Abu Hanifa sat down and said, all Sahaba ala rasna, they're all great people. Some of them I see as fuqaha, as people who are jurists, who understand the law well, and others who don't understand the law well. So I don't accept the opinion of a sahabi that I don't believe is a jurist, meaning his focus was not jurisprudence, like Khalid ibn Walid. That's not his focus. He wasn't a faqih. He was a mujahid. It's fine. It doesn't mean he's less. It's just that it's a different specialization in Islam. Consensus, of course, they accept, and they accept silent consensus. Ijma' sukuti, which is a whole different. So ijma' is when all the scholars agree to something. So Abu Hanifa said, if all of the scholars never said anything negative about something, I see that as consensus. If there's something and none of them said anything, all the scholars were quiet about this one thing, I take that as a consensus that they're okay with it. Now some scholars said, nope, we're not okay with that. Abu Hanifa and his school said, nope, that's how we see it. It's just logic. It's how they understand things. He used qiyas very liberally. Very liberally. The Hanafi school is heavy on qiyas and drawing analogies from the Prophet ﷺ's life and from the Quran. Most liberal in comparison to all of the other schools of jurisprudence. He accepts istihsan, juristic preference. This is the war between him and Imam Shafi'i, because they don't agree on this at all. Istihsan, juristic preference, meaning a jurist, yastahsin shay, he sees something that I think this is good. I think this is helpful. And of course, there comes with it a criteria. Abu Hanifa was okay with that as a source of evidence. Imam Shafi'i said, no, absolutely not. And there are volumes upon volumes written by both parties explaining why their opinion is valid. This is how the law was designed. It was designed to be like this, to have this room for people to discuss. Custom, they accept urf, for example. The Maliki school, is it working? Perfect. The Maliki school has the most, Imam Malik, he put together the most number of sources of evidence. He accepted the highest number of sources of evidence amongst all of the schools of jurisprudence. Abu Hanifa, just the ones we talked about. Imam Malik, he accepts the actions of Ahl al-Madinah, specific to certain, to his school of thought. If all of Ahl al-Madinah pray in a certain way, that's how he's praying. Doesn't matter what you tell him. Doesn't matter if you say, well, there's this guy who narrated this hadith from this guy and said to do this. He's looking at Ahl al-Madinah. If Ahl al-Madinah are doing this, why? Because he lived 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. It was still very early. And if all Ahl al-Madinah are still praying in a certain way, well, they learned this from the Sahaba, who learned it from the Prophet ﷺ, so he accepts it. He sees that in ritual specifically. And in ritual specifically, he's very big on that. No, if Ahl al-Madinah do that, then I'm okay with it. I won't accept another piece of evidence that is maybe equal to it or inferior, or comes from one person. He's less liberal when it comes to qiyas than Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayhi was. He's less strict when it comes to the rules of sunnah. What hadith he accepts. And he's less strict because he wrote the Muwatta himself. He's the one who wrote the first piece of documentation of hadith. So he was less strict on terms of what hadith he accepts. If there's no evidence, he'll accept the hadith. He's less strict at the rules. In comparison to Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i, who were much more strict. It had to be fully authentic or they didn't want it. Imam Malik was less strict. Imam Ahmad is way less strict in accepting. It's just ways of going by things. What evidence do we accept? He accepted something called istishab, which is the consideration of public interest. He accepts opinions of the companion, presumption of continuity, juristic preference. All of these sources of evidence, Imam Malik incorporated into his madhab, which is why his madhab is probably the biggest in terms of not number of followers, but in terms of books that were written. Probably amongst the schools of jurisprudence, the one that has the most books written in it is probably madhab Imam Malik, rahmatullah alayhi, madhab Imam Ahl al-Madinah. Shafi'i, for example, had a little bit less. He accepts, it's not every opinion of a companion that he accepts. He accepts only the undisputed opinion of a companion. It has to be an opinion of a companion that no other Sahabi had a different one. If there's two opinions of Sahaba, he doesn't want them anymore. Khalas, put them on the side. If one Sahabi said this and another Sahabi said that, he puts them both on the side. He needs an undisputed opinion of a companion to accept it. He refuses holistically juristic preference. Istihsan is absolutely refused by Imam al-Shafi'i. He wrote books on this because he thought it was so wrong. He accepts istishab, which is consideration of public interest and masalih mursala. And he accepted those sources of evidence. Imam Ahmad, similarly, Imam Ahmad has used the qiyas the least. And he never left the opinions of the Sahaba. Imam Ahmad, he built his madhab on being very liberal with accepting sunnah narrations. And anything the Sahaba said, he stuck to it. He used qiyas very seldom. These are just ways. It's just the coding. It's the coding. Okay, what are we going to do here? How are we going to rank this piece of evidence? If we all sat down and tried to agree, we wouldn't. If I gave you the class A and we sat down to agree how we're going to rank evidence so that we have one madhab in Islam, we wouldn't agree. And hence we have different schools of jurisprudence. And these are schools of jurisprudence that are not built by me and you. These are by the greatest scholars of our time, of our history. Imam Nu'man ibn Thabit, Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik ibn Anas, Imam Dar al-Hijrah, Imam al-Shafi'i, al-Hashimi, al-Ghazzawi, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal al-Shaybani. You're talking about the scholars who defined our history, who defined our law. These are people of levels of knowledge that most scholars did not arrive at, did not achieve in their lives. So, and they didn't do it alone. Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab is not his own. It's what he built with his followers. Same thing Imam Malik, same thing Imam Shafi'i. They built their madhab with their students and with the people who are knowledgeable with them, arriving at conclusions. So where does ijtihad come into all of this then? Well, ijtihad, which is trying to interpret rulings or extract rulings from their sources of evidence. This is what ijtihad is. It's used for three things. It's used for indications of terms, dilalatul alfaz, what the words mean. So, like, for example, qur'. What does qur' mean? It requires ijtihad. We have to perform ijtihad here. What does this word mean? There's lack of clarity. Someone has to call it. Someone has to call it, or we're going to sit in front of this word with nothing. We have no idea what to do. Someone has to decide what this is. So every madhab, the mujtahid would, based on the evidence that he has available to him, and based on what is logical, and based on all the sources of evidence, he will say, okay, this is what I'm going to call this word. I accept quru as hayda, which is what Abu Hanifa says, or tuhur as Imam Shafi'i. So they have different ways of looking at this. Fi ma'qul an-nas, the interpretation of the text, meaning what the spirit of the text is trying to explain. What is the text saying in its totality? What are you supposed to understand from these 4 or 5 verses? في معقول النص. And the third one, هو في تحقيق المناط, which is achieving the objective. What is the objective of these verses? These commands, what are we trying to achieve? This is where ijtihad exists. Understanding the meaning of the word, interpreting the totality of the text, and figuring out what the objective is. What are we trying to achieve with this ruling? What is the goal? If there's no goal to a ruling, then there's a problem. We have a problem if there's no goal at all. There has to be something. There has to be some objective that we're trying to achieve. Like you pointed out, it's healthy. So there has to be something that we're trying to achieve. So they have to do ijtihad in figuring out what the objective is and what the illah is. So the ijtihad happens in what the illah is. What is the preceding reason? Why did he make it? If you can figure out the preceding reason and it makes good sense, it has a strong argument, then now you're capable of keeping this ruling when the reason is there, and removing the ruling when the reason is not there, which is very important. That's why rulings are not constants in Islam. Ilal are, reasonings are, objectives are. Rulings are variables. Rulings will change depending on circumstances. The ilal, the reasoning behind them don't change. Those are the principles, they never change. Which is why you need to study not just usul al-fiqh and fiqh. You have to study qawa'id fiqhiyya. You have to study the legal maxims. Because those legal maxims are designed to hold on to the principles of what we're trying to achieve. And that's why when we struggled today with a lot of rulings, and people get upset if I say, no, it's mubah. Well, this sheikh, hamar, that might be fun. What does he know? He knows nothing. Look at him, he's saying this is haram. He says he didn't read this. They don't understand that there's an illah for this hukum. There's an illah for this hukum. This illah is not there anymore. So the hukum is not there anymore. When we talk about, for example, ladies who are traveling ladies. The hukum is that she needs a mahram when she travels, right? Is there an illah for that? Is there a reason for that? Or is it just a reasonless, objectiveless ruling? Now to say that obviously means you don't understand Islam at all, because every hukm mu'allal, every ruling Allah gives mu'allal. This is again consensus of scholars. There's not one scholar who does not agree to this. So what is the reasoning? What they don't agree with is, what is the reason? Is there a reason? Do we know the reason? Have we figured out the reason? The majority of scholars say the reason is safety. The reason is making sure she's safe. So when it's safe, he doesn't need a mahram. The ruling is she needs a mahram. When it's unsafe, it's safe now. Khalas, the ruling is not there anymore. It's unsafe, the ruling is there. Okay, it's very simple. It's very simple. So when she says, well, can I drive to Toronto without a mahram? Yes, you can drive to Toronto. I get a phone call angry. No, she can drive to Toronto. What do I want to tell you? What the gangs of Toronto on the highway are going to take her? What am I going to say? Lie to you? If she called me and said, I want to go to Syria or Gaza, no, you need a mahram, or you need at least to talk to your mahram, or at least to have a conversation with them, because the idhn of the mahram is important, the permission of the mahram, whether it's your father, or whether it's your husband, or whether it's your brother, someone who's responsible for your safety. Now, this is the part of it. It's just it's a matter of understanding of how the ahkam exist. And most of what we answer, most of the questions I get and the answers I provide are based on very clear Islamic legal principles that allow for a ruling to exist or not exist depending on the situation that we're in. And scholars, when they disagree on whether this reason is valid or not, and whether there's another reason that you missed, or whether there's more than one reason, or your reason is wrong. They differ on that. And they have not only the right to differ on that, they are obligated to differ on that. They're supposed to push back and disagree to come to the right conclusion. All right. So I'm going to go through some, well, we're doing well in time. Excellent. This is perfect. Some bottom line statements for you, because this is what I want you to walk away with. This is what is obvious within, Wallahu alam, our deen. Number one, so all schools of jurisprudence are valid. All of them. All the 4 schools that we have are valid schools of jurisprudence. You should follow one. In your life, you should choose one and learn it. And only leave that school's rulings for extreme reasons, when it's very difficult, when it ruins functionality. Meaning when this ruling is causing you difficulty. For example, in Shafi'i madhab, if you touch another lady, a man touches a lady, they lose wudu, right? Even if it's just a tap. So a guy who's driving public transportation all day in Syria, and every day he has to take the wealth, the money, so he puts his hand out, most of the time, or half of the time, it's a lady sitting behind him, she touches him, he loses wudu. Now he has to pray dhuhr, he has to go find a place to park, and he has to come down, he has to make wudu. It's very difficult for him. It makes his life really, really hard. So can this person, he follows Shafi'i madhab, can for this ruling, he search other opinions, listen to the evidence, and then accept another? Yes, he can, because there's an issue of severe difficulty and loss of functionality. This is not shopping. This is when this ruling is causing difficulty for you. So you go and you see, are there other pieces of evidence? You listen to them. If they make sense to you, then you can follow it. If they don't make sense to you, you can't. Like if you listen to the argument and it doesn't make sense to you, you shouldn't follow it. Right? But if it does. To make things easier, you may follow the opinion of your local imam. This is a part that I talk about this often because I don't think people understand it. You are not obligated to do all of this on your own as a common Muslim. Unless you're a talib ilm, if you're a seeker of knowledge, and this is what you're doing with your time, you're spending a certain amount of time, you've dedicated it to learn your deen in depth, then you can go ahead and you can study every opinion and study the evidence behind it and the arguments that existed, and then you can draw the conclusion that makes most sense to you. That is totally fine. But if you're not, and you don't have the tools to do that, you don't have the linguistic tools, or you don't have the logical tools, or you don't have the Islamic knowledge tools to do this, then you are very much within your rights to follow the local imam's opinion on all matters of jurisprudence. This is my job. I am actually useless if I'm not allowed to do this. If I put for you, here's what the ahkam of siyam that I'm going to share with you. Here's what I've spent my life studying. Here's what I think suits this place. Here they are. Even if you're like, well, I follow the Hanafi school. Good for you. I don't care. It doesn't matter. You don't have to tell me that. As far as you're concerned, if you're attendee here, then you're good to just follow what I explained to you. And when you're not here, you can go ahead and follow your Hanafi. You have the madhab so that when you're on your own, so then when you're functioning in life and you don't have a scholar, you don't have an imam, you don't have a masjid that you're attached to, you have a way to practice the rituals appropriately. But the moment you're attached to something, you're good. Khalas, what is the imam here doing? So whether you're Hanafi or Maliki or Shafi or Hanbali, when you stand in prayer, you pray the way we're praying. Just pray like us. You don't have to worry about it because this is something that the imam carries for you. It makes your life easier. So you must follow local imams on issues of jurisprudence that affect the community and in public settings. When it's a public setting issue, you don't get the choice at all. Maybe on a personal issue, you don't want to follow the local imam. Fine, you can do whatever suits you within your madhab. That's not a problem. I'll never push back against that. You have every right to do that, and I'll protect that right for you for as long as I'm alive. But when it comes to a public issue, no. You don't get to decide that, okay, I want everyone to do what I want. I want the whole community to adhere to my understanding of the ruling. No, 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 you have to follow what the local imams are doing. In public issues, absolutely. And if we just did that, this whole moon sighting calculation garbage would end. We wouldn't have to deal with this anymore. Because look, just the imams will talk about it, they'll agree to something, and then you don't have to carry this anymore. It's not on you. If we messed up, we carry it in front of Allah. If we entered into this argument with biases, and with bad intentions, and with ignorance, then we carry that Yawm al-Qiyamah. You don't have to worry about this. You can just say, that's your problem. What? I would love to have that in my life. I don't understand why people don't, it blows my mind. You're being told, you don't have to worry about this. Let us worry about this. No, I want to worry about this. I need to explain to you what this problem is. Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated to talk about this. This is not your domain. Have you shown me your degrees? If you have all those Islamic degrees, sit on the council with us and make your argument. Otherwise, we've made it easier for you. We'll carry this for you. You don't have to worry about it. No, I want to worry about it. This is the silliest thing I've ever heard of. And it comes from lack of understanding. There's a specific right answer here. If we don't get it, then all of Ramadan is gone. Really? That's how you understand? يقول صلى الله عليه وصحبه وسلم الصوم يوم تصومون والفطر يوم تفطرون والأضحى يوم تضحون. Your fasting is the day that you fast. And your Eid al-Fitr is the day that you declare as Eid al-Fitr. And the Eid al-Adha is the day that you declare as Eid al-Adha. You don't think the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba got it wrong? They got it wrong all the time. They looked up and there was a cloud. That's it. That's it. The moon was there, but there was a cloud, so they made 30. It's not about that. This is not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed Islam or designed our understanding of it. If people would take off my hands a certain aspect of jurisprudence, I would never look back at the rest of my life. Khalas, I don't have to worry about this anymore. It's something that someone else is going to carry, someone else is going to speak about. I don't have to worry about this. But we don't see, and the reason that the common Muslim does not allow this and not just give it up is because it's not because they are knowledgeable about Islam. It's because the opposite. It's because they don't understand how Islam works. This is not your obligation. This is not your space. It's not where you fit in this story. But this problem will never end. It seems like. One may follow opinions. The movie, perfect. Yeah. Outside the traditional schools of thought, as long as there is proper evidence. This is best done by following a local scholar. So there are 4 schools of jurisprudence. I can tell you that 99% of all opinions in fiqh exist within them already. Exist within those schools, all of them. But every once in a while, there'll be an opinion that didn't exist in the schools of jurisprudence. A scholar from outside of the school, or a scholar who belonged to the school, one of the schools, brought an opinion that never got incorporated into that madhab. It just stayed as an opinion outside. You can follow that as long as it has proper evidence. But it's best done by following a local imam, not by yourself. Because I don't know, you would have to have a lot of skills and a very good skill set, a lot of tools to be able to validate this opinion appropriately on your own. So it's best done by following a local scholar. And my job is to do that, is when I look at the madhab, and I look at the opinions that exist, and I don't find that these opinions are achieving the objective, the illah is not there, it's not helping people, I search for other opinions, and I search for other things that scholars have said. For example, let's not do that. Let's just keep this generic for my peace of mind, inshallah. So, but that's what you have to do. You're obligated to follow the local. If the local scholar uses an opinion outside of the 4 schools, then that's what he does, and you're welcome to follow that. On your own, be very careful. You have to know that it has a proper argument behind it. You may not be qualified to verify that. All opinions within the schools of jurisprudence have proper evidence to support their rulings. All of those opinions. These are schools of jurisprudence. All of the opinions that exist within these schools have evidence to support them. There's no piece of there's no ruling within a school of jurisprudence, within the madhab al-Hanafi or Maliki or Shafi or Hanbali, that is just there and they forgot to look at it. Or someone just slapped it there because they were bored. Every single wording in every madhab in terms of opinions, every ruling, there's evidence to support it. And you just have to go and learn those pieces of evidence. One must differentiate between jurisprudence and values. This is probably the piece that would take the longest time if I were to talk about it, but I'm not. But differentiate between principles and values, which is I talked to you about the illah, for example, and jurisprudence, the ahkam, the rulings, the fiqh rulings, right? They're not the same. There's flexibility in the rulings. The rulings can differ, will move depending on a lot of variables. The values of Islam, which I interpret as the ilal of these rulings, I mean the reasoning behind, these are not for sale, and these don't change. And you have to differentiate between these. Honesty, there's no loyalty, trustworthiness. These aren't fiqh. These are solid, right? These are very clear. We don't steal. We don't murder. We don't commit fawahish. These are not fiqh issues. Open books of fiqh, you're not going to find anything there that talks about it because the fiqh is not interested in it. This is just, these are our values as Muslims. On the other hand, fiqh issues, what do we do with dogs? What can I do if a dog brushes up against me? This is not a value. This is not an Islamic value. This is a fiqh opinion. You will find different opinions on this based on their scholars that interpreted the evidence differently. It's not a value, it's a hukm. So differentiate between ahkam, rulings, and values. Very important. This is like honestly, the zubda of this whole thing. Like the bottom line of my whole is you have to differentiate between these two things. We don't compromise our values ever. My job is to protect the values. And if I die, whoever comes in my position has to sit here as a protector of Islamic values, to keep the principles protected, that they're not compromised ever. Fiqh, my job is to find the easiest fiqh for you, the most functional. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do that for you. If I don't do that for you, then what good am I? The whole point is me finding for you the ruling that suits you best and suits your circumstances appropriately. They relate. I think I have that. Okay, let's listen. Trying to get too carried away here. So, following a school of jurisprudence is safer because it's the collective opinions of 100,000 scholars throughout history, right? Each ruling has been studied 1,000 times over. So when you follow a madhab, you're not following. So you have two options, right? Taking the opinion of one scholar is acceptable as long as they have, they're local to you. Don't take an opinion of one scholar who's living 10,000 miles away, right? Don't do that because it'll ruin my blood pressure. Don't do that. Just for me, don't do it. Don't follow a scholar who's living 10,000 miles away. Listen to a scholar who's local, right? And is knowledgeable, and they're aware of the other arguments. You can follow that one opinion, right? But what's safer? To follow the opinion of one person or 100,000 scholars over time, right? Like, no, this is every ruling in each madhab has been studied 1,000 times over. That's why I tell you, go learn a madhab. You're safe in a madhab. Within the constructs of a madhab, you're safe. Because 100,000 scholars in the last 1,000 years have studied every single ruling and wrote books upon it, volume upon volume upon volume, explaining why this makes sense, why this argument is. And scholars, by the way, don't get biased by their madhab off the bat. No. Scholars move from one madhab to the other all the time. Like you have scholars who were Maliki at the beginning, turned Hanbali later, or Shafi'i at the beginning, turned Hanafi later, right? Because they studied, and then they think, no, I don't agree with this. Their arguments make more sense, and they switch over. And those are the most interesting of scholars because they have deep knowledge of both schools of jurisprudence, and they write the nicest books. Like their books are the best because they have deep knowledge of both the madhab. Sometimes they move to three, like they move in three different madhab before they decide to stick to one of them. So you can follow the opinion of a local scholar, no problem. Is it safer? I don't think so, but you can. It's not wrong. Like I said, you're always within your rights to ask a local imam and take an answer and stick to it. But a madhab is just safer for you as a person because it's larger. It's broader. More people have talked about it. You're always permitted to follow your local scholar's opinion. You're always permitted. You're never not. That's why that we have this system. That's why you have a mihrab and a mimbar. That's why you have people who sit and do this. The point of it is that you can just follow that. Okay, what was the ahkam al-siyam? You come the week before. I break down for you all of the rulings for siyam. You're good, regardless of what madhab you follow. You can just stick to that and say, well, that's what the sheikh is doing here, and you do that. That's how they're praying. That's how you don't have to worry about it because I carry it. It's on me. If I messed up, if I don't know what I'm doing, then I have to be held accountable for that yawm al-qiyamah. You don't. Unless you have reason to believe that I'm full of it. And in that case, then you have to look into it a little bit deeply. And then that's how this works. This is how this whole system is designed to work. So this brings me to the piece of this is the argument that I think. Those who think that there is one correct answer to every ruling inquiry, and that is obvious, it's obvious what the answer is, lack true knowledge, honestly, and don't know how Islamic law actually works. When someone comes and tells me, why all of this? Follow Quran and Sunnah. Yeah, what do you think we're doing? What do you think we're doing? What do you think we're following Torah and Injil? What do you think I'm doing? It's Quran and Sunnah. And when there's not there, then we have to look for ijma', and when it's not there, we look into qiyas, and when it's not there, we look into the opinions of the sahaba, and it's not there, we look into the istishab, and it's not there, we look into we have to look places to find rulings. What do you think we're doing? What do you think Abu Hanifa was trying to do? Or it's very offensive when that's said, by the way. It's offensive. It's like a slap in the face, right? It's like it's like me in the clinic. I'm explaining things to a patient. He says, "I need you to follow, evidence-based medicine." Yes, Lemli. What am I doing? What do you think I'm a naturopath? Why are you here? Why am I even talking? What do you think I studied for 15 years? To come and talk to you about what? About what I saw, what my dream last night was about curing cancer? Here's the evidence, and here's what works for you. It's not appropriate. It's ayib aslan. Like, I mean, those who say, no, leave all of them madahib and follow Quran and Sunnah, this is the stupidest statement that's ever been made within Islamic law in the last 100 years. This is the worst statement to make. And honestly, I have to say this because it has detrimental effects on our community. It has like catastrophic effects on Muslims' mindsets and Muslims' practices, because it is assuming that all of these scholars, all 400,000 of them, were just playing around, right? And maybe one of them wasn't, the guy that you like. You know, your guy got it right. But everyone else was just, had nothing else to do, but they were bored, so they just decided to play around. But your guy got it, and maybe the few other guys that believe in your guy. So you and 6 guys. All that is just a new madhab, that's all. All you're doing is just you're suggesting a new madhab, which is fine by me. I have no problem with that. If you have found a different way of ranking the evidence, and the person who is doing that is qualified to do that, then go by all means. Begin your madhab and spread your madhab, and if people accept it, Allahumma barik. Ibn Hazm couldn't do it. Right? Al-Layth ibn Sa'ad couldn't do it. Al-Awza'i couldn't do it, but maybe you can. I don't know. Go for it. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. But to use that terminology as if what we're teaching when you sit down and you study a book of fiqh, as if no, you should go study Quran and Sunnah. It shows me that you have no idea what you're talking about. Like you just have not been educated appropriately. You have not studied Islam. You don't understand how Islam works to begin with. Now you do. When someone says Quran and Sunnah, you're like, yeah, that's the first two. Right? Those are the first 2 sources of evidence for every madhab, and then there's all these other sources of evidence, and you have to classify them and rank them, and then you have to interpret them. You're like, yeah, well, of course, that's what we're doing. Of course, that's why we're concluding this piece of evidence. Well, why did this madhab not accept this hadith and something? Well, there's a reasoning. There's a reasoning why Abu Hanifa doesn't accept every hadith in Bukhari. You know why? You know why? Because Bukhari came 150 years later after him. That's why. Because Abu Hanifa is at the level of the 4th guy Bukhari is narrating from. That's why. He doesn't accept every single one there. Because it's like me, being told to do something within my domain of knowledge by a 4th generation person, or 5th generation person down the line, based on their knowledge that they got through someone who I lived with. Someone who was a peer to me, like we used to argue. But no, I have a narration that this guy used to do this. I know. I saw him. He was with me. The sheikh of your sheikh of your sheikh of your sheikh was my buddy. So calm down. Calm down a little bit. I spent time with Ibn Mas'ud. I'm not defending Hanafi madhab. I'm just explaining to you an example. You can come to Imam Malik and tell him, oh, you need to pray differently. Or you can tell Imam Malik, who lived in the Medina of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, and watched the tabi'een praying in the masjid of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in his mihrab, how to pray. You're going to tell him how to pray, based on a narration that you found in a hadith. Hawnan, Ruwaida. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. This is not how things are done. Don't worry, these scholars have looked at all of these pieces of evidence and they've argued them. And this madhahib over time have changed their positions on many things. And they continue to do that. Now, when evidence makes more sense to them, when it fits their algorithm, when the algorithm of interpretation that they have, when a piece of evidence fits it better, they'll take that for sure. They do that all the time. Like if you don't know that because you haven't studied fiqh enough. Imam Shafi'i has 2 madhabs, one called al-Qadim and one called al-Jadid, which is why it's a hard madhab to study. Because when you study it, you have to say, وَقَالَ فِي الْجَدِيدِ كَذَا وَقَالَ فِي الْقَدِيمِ كَذَا وَقَالَ الْإِمَامُ الرَّافِعِ كَذَا وَقَالَ الْإِمَامُ الْمُزَنِي كَذَا, and you end up with 4 different opinions on the same topic, and you have to figure out which is the one that's mu'tamad, that is acceptable, which ones aren't. Because Imam Shafi'i just moved from one place to the other, and because he knows fiqh evolves. But you understand fiqh more than Imam Shafi'i. It's a level of arrogance that exists within us that we feel that we can make these statements to the scholars of our deen, the scholars of our history, who dedicated the entirety of their lives just doing one thing. And they did it early on in our history. So before things changed and before we lost our ability to understand Arabic. Oversimplifying the matter is an attempt to undermine Islamic law and leads to fundamentalism, it leads to extremism. Most of those who make these claims lack the tools and training to extract rulings properly. All they're doing sometimes is just extracting literally, meaning choosing certain pieces of evidence, ignoring a bunch of other pieces of evidence, and then understanding them literally with no context. Yeah. And that may work for certain acts of worship. Maybe for the lihya and for the thobe, maybe that works. But then for foreign policy, right? For foreign policy and for interfaith relationships, it doesn't work. And it leads to, again, catastrophic effects within communities. It ruins things. We lack flexibility, we lack functionality. Following the Quran and Sunnah is exactly what the schools did and continue to do. Processing pieces of evidence interpretation is a complex process. I hope I was able to show you that doing this is a complex process. It's not simple. It requires a lot of legal minds and a lot of knowledge to actually do all of that. And inshallah, you'll become one of those people if you're interested in this. If you love this and you find, I love this, then study it. It'll take 15, 20 years. It's not infinite amount of time. Medicine takes the time. I entered medical school in 2004. It's only been 21 years. Yeah, that's it. It's nothing, 21 years. Why? If medicine takes 21 years, then Islam can take something similar. No big deal. Commit yourself to it. If you don't want to, it's too much, you can choose a field within Islamic law and study it and be an expert in it and offer opinion. Or you can just learn Islam, enough of Islam to practice for yourself, to have spiritual clarity and have closeness, and accept what the scholars have been talking about. Well, that's easy. All of it is easy. If we just stopped arguing about things we don't fully understand and allow those who know what they're talking about actually do their jobs. So why is there all this differing? Why all this differing? You may be listening to me saying, why? It's too much. Just give me one answer for everything. Why is there all this differing? Ya akhi, it's confusing. Because it's the divine design. This is the divine design. It's how he designed it, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The system was built that way. It was built to grow, to evolve, to adapt, to help people in society achieve their objectives and their best interests and their highest potential. There's going to be different opinions. That is how it was designed. It's not by flaw. It's not by lack of documentation. It's not by lack of knowledge and scholarly efforts. It's just by design. He designed it that way, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He could have done it differently. Like I told you at the beginning, he could have said to Musa, tell them, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً لَا فَارِضٌ وَلَا بِكْرٌ عَوَانٌ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ صَفْرَاءُ فَاقِعٌ. He didn't. He said, اذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً, and he stopped, knowing that there's a million different types of cows. Just choose one. I'm happy. I'll be satisfied with you. I am pleased with you, and I will reward you. Just choose one. Don't overcomplicate things for yourself when you don't have to. I'll end with the following idea. When it comes to fatwa, and I didn't put that here, but when it comes to istifta, my job when you ask a question is to look for the most reasonable ruling of ease for you. Your job is to be on the safe side for yourself. When you flip that relationship, you ruin the deen. When the relationship becomes, you come to me wanting me to tell you it's halal. You want and I am trying to be safe for your deen by saying, no, it's safer that you don't do this. That's how you ruin Islam. My job is not to care for your safety. That's your job. Your job is to care for the safety of your rituals and your behaviors and to make sure that you're on the right side of Yawm al-Qiyamah. My job is to look at the law and see if there is flexibility to make life easier for you. And that's my job, to see, is there flexibility in the law? Is there an interpretation that is valid? Is there a sequence, there's an algorithm of evidence interpretation that allows for a ruling of ease here? And if there is, I'm going to offer it to you, because that's my job. Anyone can say it's haram. I can get up here, pick any of you, sit here, every time you ask a question, say it's haram. Easy, easy. And people will love you, by the way. And you'll get more videos and likes, and people will say, see, هذا متبع. يقول الإمام سفيان الثوري قال العلم الرخصة عن الثقة أما التحريم فيجيده كل أحد. Imam al-Thawri says that true knowledge is a rukhsa, is a ruling of ease that comes from someone who is trustworthy and knowledgeable. As for prohibiting things, everyone can do that. That's nothing. Everyone can say, Sheikh, is it okay for me to work? Haram. No, it's not. Don't even continue. It's not. I can assume. Bank, not bank. Oh, slaughterhouse, what is that? It's haram. It's all haram. I don't need to. It's less about, Sheikh, can I buy it? No, you can't. You can't buy a car on a lease, or you can't buy a house. It's all haram. It's easy. It makes no effort at all from me. I end the conversation immediately. I can go to sleep early. I don't have to waste time on phone calls. I don't have to be called any names later on that I'm this, deviant or whatever. I don't have to go into any of that. It's just easy. But that's not my job. And your job is to be like, is it risky? Well, it is, ya Sheikh. There's two opinions, and the majority opinion is that this is not the right way to go. But there is a proper, valid opinion that allows for it. And then you have to make the choice of what you're going to do. And you have to decide if you want to be safer, which is, I'll talk about this, inshallah, sometime this week after Fajr. Wara', you have wara', or you don't. My job is not to be that I'm not the police. I don't police rulings for you. I just provide them. I provide the education and the evidence for you. I hope that was a benefit to you. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.